Morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are all here today as Americans. There is no southern, northern, or slave problem. There is an American problem. I want to dedicate myself to helping this country strengthen the bonds between the men, women, and children of this great nation. We are not enemies but friends who share a common history. As a young boy, I spent most of my childhood in the rugged wilderness of Indiana. There, I was schooled through experience in literature. As a young adult, I was in charge of a mill store. There, I was introduced to all kinds of folks. People from near, far, and who traded goods, shared stories and visions for this great nation. It was through these exchanges, in my experience as a volunteer captain in the Black Hawk War, that I was able to gain a better understanding of the true spirit of this country and its people. As a member of the United States House of Representatives and experienced attorney and lobbyist for the Illinois Central Railroad, I have combined my effort, knowledge, and skills to become a true representative of each and every one of you. My intent is for the people of this great nation to find a common thread that can keep us together. I'd like to discuss the social, political, and economic advantages that we can and must employ to make this nation stronger. I hope to provide the leadership that this country needs to preserve her fragile union. I believe that the union itself is an essential element of this country. It is older than we the people, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence. We must consider despite all efforts of secession to preserve it. On that premise, I am aware that there are persons who are seeking to destroy the unions at all events. I wholly object to all schemes for disunion. I denounce threats of separation as related to a popular overthrow of power and denies that vital principles of a free government. There was no need for bloodshed such as has occurred in Kansas, Nebraska, and Harpers Ferry. The present Democratic administration has gone too far with its sectional interests as related to the Lecompton Constitution by its attempt to enforce slavery on land and sea through the intervention of Congress and the federal courts for purely local interests in its abuse of the power against its trusted citizens. In a country made from unity, I will attempt to ensure that the United States will remain as one as compared to the opposing Democratic Party that have held multiple conventions. I have witnessed the consequences of divide. I believe the adage of holding your friends close and your enemies closer. Therefore, I have selected a sturdy cabinet composed of many intelligent, well-versed men, including William Seward, Selwyn P. Chase, Edward Bates, and Edwin Stanton. This cabinet will serve to clean the house and tighten up our economy, and hold accountable for all who have attempted to rob our country and wealth through favored partisans, frauds, and corruptions. I believe in the preservation of the rights of the states, and especially the right of each state to control its own domestic institutions. This right is essential to base the power on which our political framework depends. I also denounce the use of armed forces as well as other state or territory that may want to tip the scale. But in terms of slavery, of land and slavery, I at this moment interpret that the United States Constitution does not determine the institution of slavery in all territories of the United States. My opinion for this institution of slavery is the moderate, to say the least. I am not an abolitionist, but I am against the expansion of slavery. I believe the institution is a moral issue. If slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong. The government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. The Supreme Court should not have to decide when slavery is allowed in a territory. I believe that the normal condition of this territory of the United States is that of freedom, that no person should be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. I believe it is our duty to maintain these Constitution provisions and allow Congress to make legislation that would further the institution of slavery. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 marks a crossroad in American politics and gives rise to the debates between myself and my running mate Stephen Douglas. We must ask ourselves, should the Supreme Court decide whether or not a slave state is free or slave, or should we the people decide? We must determine in a federal constitution has committed our nation to the spread of freedom or slavery. I accept that the government does not have the right to intervene with the bonds of a state where slavery already exists. I proclaim that the freedom is paramount, as our Republican fathers did when they abolished slavery in our national territory. I also declare that no man has the right to govern over another without consent. African slave trade under our national flag is a crime against humanity that brings shame to our inherent values of our country. As for Nebraska, I am not advocating for the establishment of political and social equality between the whites and blacks. Instead, I shall argue against the extension of slavery, allowing the institution to exist where it already does, with the hopes that it will eventually become diminished, as I believe that there is no peaceful elimination of slavery in our prospect of our nation. To proceed in our quest for unity, we must consider the economy of the United States. I am alarmed by the unmanaged expenditures of the federal government and call for return to more careful management of our wealth. Also, to hold men accountable for the plunder of the public treasury favored by partisans and to work to eliminate fraud and corruptions at a federal level. With the Union on the verge of falling apart, we must prepare to fight for its preservation. In the case of war, I consider it my duty to use all economic powers to my advantage as the President of the Union. I see value in both the northern and southern states of America. Northern states bring wealth through the factories and railroads. I wish to expand and use this to our advantage. Northern industry will keep protective terrorists in a better place and economy for all. Also, the farmlands in the south shall continue as such to produce the strengthen our agricultural industry and trade between the nations. An adjustment of duties assigned to imports is necessary to encourage the development of the industrial interests of our entire country. I support a policy of our nation exchanges that will secure the working men's liberal wages, fair and balanced agricultural prices, and adequate reward for mechanics and manufacturers for their skill, labor, and enterprise. I impart that this will preserve our independence as a strong, wealthy nation. I believe that the federal government must allocate aid for the construction of a railroad to the Pacific Ocean and overland mail system and appropriations by Congress for the river and harbor improvements. These systems shall serve the whole country and will secure existing commerce and protect our lives and property of our citizens. In terms of national territories, at this moment, I protest against any sale and alienation to others of the public lands held by the actual settlers. I hold that the westward expansion shall serve to strengthen our nation. Also demand the passage by Congress and a homestead plan that may allow a male head of household the opportunity to venture westward to secure farm and potential purchase government-owned land. I am also opposed to any change in our neutralization laws and forbid any state legislation from interfering with these laws in favor of giving full, efficient protection to the rights of all classes of citizens, whether native or neutralized, both at home and abroad. Finally, having thus set forth principles and views that shall provide provisions for all, I invite cooperations of all citizens to put aside my impatience, rebellion, and local differences in support of our Constitution. It is through our continued union that the country may maintain independence, growth, and prosperity. It is my firm belief that America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves. We must seek to find a common ground.